One of the main things elite coaches do to get the max velocity of their athletes higher is assisted or supramaximal sprint work. While these two types of training sessions are slightly different, with assisted sprint work helping you reach and maintain your own max velocity, while supramaximal training will help you run at higher speeds than you voluntarily would be able to get, the tools that are being used to do these training sessions are almost identical. In this video, we'll go over the most used tools, plus one bonus upcoming system, and rank them from basic to ultimate on this scale. We'll start with one of the most used tools, that being wind. Max velocity sprinting with tailwind or wind in the back is something that has been done since forever. The assist you get from the wind makes it so the athlete has to put less effort into the acceleration and maintenance of the desired velocity. While wind is free and available everywhere, it also has one very big downside. It's unreliable, and that makes planning ahead for a max velocity training session near impossible, because you won't know in advance exactly what direction the wind will be coming from and how strong it's going to be. So it might be a good tool to enhance a regular max velocity training if you notice the wind being present, but planning specific sessions ahead of time and counting on the wind being there in the right amount just won't work. Because of all this, wind-assisted running is placed on the lowest row on our scale, the basic category. Next up is downhill sprints. Just like with the wind, a slight downhill section assists the athlete in accelerating to and maintaining max speed. It can also possibly even help you go into overspeed if the mechanics of the athlete or athletes are good enough. Now, besides that, a slight downhill can also be a very good tool to stimulate the max velocity running mechanics at submax speed. This is because on a downhill section, the athlete must really make use of his vertical forces. If he or she pushes back too far behind, the risk of falling is even greater than in a regular run. Because of the greater risk of falling, if you don't control your movements, it is important to not to do this on a steep downhill section, but to do this on a gradual strip. Some tracks have a track surface downhill section built next to their competition track, but those aren't widespread. So most of the times, these sessions are done on asphalt, dirt or downhill grass roads. Because this is a free-to-use and more standardized training tool, meaning if you use the same hill, a training can be repeated the same way over weeks and months, and despite it having some downsides like the fact that these downhill sections aren't widespread, especially not the track surface ones, we place downhill sprinting one row higher in the good category. Our third option is elastic bands or bungee cords. While these bands or elastic ropes are a perfect tool to give the athlete a certain resistance to push against, they can also be used to give assistance and pull an athlete forward all the way to his or her max velocity or even slightly above it, and thereby functioning as a supramaximal sprinting tool. The big advantage here is that these bands or elastic ropes are easy to carry around, they are relatively cheap, around $30 to $40 US, and the final positive is that they can be found in many different strengths. The downside is that you'll need a second person, coach, assistant or athlete, to pull the band so the running athlete can get his or her assistance. Second downside is that it's very difficult to give the same assistance rep after rep. Third, depending on the type of bands that you use and the way they pull the athlete, there is also the risk of the athlete getting tangled in the rope, which can cause injuries. Because of all this, the elastic bands and bungees are joining the downhill sprints in the good category. Option 4 for assisted and supramaximal sprinting is pulley systems like the Speedy. These systems require 2 to 3 people to operate it, one athlete that will be going into max velocity or overspeed, one person that will be pulling the athlete forward, and sometimes a final one that will fixate the second end of the pulley right up until the point where the two running athletes will cross each other. Because the pulley is fixated on one end, the back athlete will be pulled forward double the speed the front athlete is running. This way the back athlete can be brought to his or her max velocity or even go in overspeed and try to maintain that even after the rope falls off. Like you might suspect, the amount of people needed to operate this tool is one of its biggest downsides. Besides that, there is also a risk of the athlete getting tangled in the rope if the timing of the release by the assistants is done poorly. Finally, it takes the front athlete some rep before they get accustomed to accelerate fluently so the back athlete doesn't get any shocks or abrupt changes in velocity. But once the athletes get to know each other's desired speeds, this can be a very valuable tool. Despite the price being a bit more expensive at $500 or 450 euros, we place it in the great category because it is a very easy tool to help you go into overspeed, it's portable, and it can be used anywhere. Next up, we have the 1080 Sprint by Anemometer and the Overspeed by Muscle Lab. These can be categorized as motorized linear encoder systems, and while the 1080 Sprint is the better known tool, it looks and does exactly the same thing as the Overspeed. These rectangular boxes have a rope inside, connected to some motors, and via a connection with your PC or tablet, you can perfectly dial in how much assistance or resistance you want to give to your athletes. Yes, you heard that correctly. These devices can be used as either a resisted sprinting tool or as an assisted supramaximal sprinting tool. Once you dialed in how much assistance you want to give to your athlete, the rope will be rolled up into the box and thus pulling the athlete forward at the desired speed. The main advantage here is that these tools give you the most accurate, repeatable, and safest way to do assisted or overspeed training. There is also a quick release system to prevent athletes from falling over the rope, but there is always a chance of falling, and no overspeed system is 100% fail-safe. The main downside here is the price, which comes in at around $20,000 at the time of recording, depending on where you look. Besides that, the athlete won't be able to operate this device on his or her own, so a coach will always need to be present. Because this tool lets you do accurate and repeatable assisted sprints, and the fact that you can get so much valuable data out of it, like step length, frequency, peak velocity, and much more, we put them in the perfect category. Now you might wonder, if these are only perfect, which tool is the ultimate assisted sprint device? Well, that will be the one that improves on the downsides of our Overspeed and 1080 Sprint, that being price, operability, and transportability. Recently, 1080 Motion released a new device that addresses these downsides to an extent. The 1080 Sprint 2 is a more portable version of the 1080 Sprint 1. It has a longer line and a display on the box for ease of use. The price is set to be below $17,000, which is still a lot, but every $1,000 less than the regular 1080 Sprint is a move in the right direction. So the 1080 Sprint 2 slides right to the top row in the ultimate category. If you thought this was it, we're sorry, but we promised one bonus tool, and it's a special one, because up until filming this video, there is no company that sells a commercial product in this category, and to be honest, we don't know if there will ever be one. The tools we're talking about are drag reduction systems, which means the athlete is sprinting without air resistance. This is most often done, for instance, by running behind an open from the back cabin that is being pulled forward by a car. This clip from Marcel Jacobs doing supramaximal sprints went viral a few years ago. However, in preparation for the Paris 2024 Olympics, the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology created the Air Shield, a similar tool compared to the cabin and car that Jacobs used, but they fine-tuned it and added some technology to get important metrics out of each run. For instance, a LiDAR sensor was added that evaluates the distance between itself and the athlete at a very high frequency, and depending on that distance, it controls the go-kart's speed. So the driver of the go-kart is only in control of the direction of the kart, not its speed. Now, this type of training is only available for a few top-class sprinters. And while there are very few downsides, there is no rope to get tangled in, you only need one extra person to drive the kart, there is always the risk of having a technical error and the athlete colliding with the cabin. Maybe one day these drag reduction systems can dethrone the 1080 Sprint 2 in the ultimate category, but for now, this is our overview of all the tools and devices we've covered. Let us know in the comments if you have tested any of these yourself and whether you would have put some tools under another category. And if you want to help out the channel, like the video and subscribe to the channel, it really means a lot to us.